Hello everyone, and welcome to my YNR Update 24 channel. I hope you're having a great day. Don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up before we dive into today's Young and the Restless update. Billy protests that he has to protect Chancellor in the takeover. Sally reminds him the takeover is illegal. Billy says Victor handing it to Nikki should have been illegal. They keep bickering until he asks if they're in trouble. Sally says this decision belongs to him. Hers, whatever it is, will belong to her. Billy's Sally YNR Victoria fights back on the Kane train. Phyllis backs off on complaining about Billy. Kane explains they just have to yank off the bandage and take control of Newman Enterprises. Victoria appears and seethes, "Over my dead body." Kane offers her a coffee and they get into it. Vicky says she spoke to Lily and Maddie on speakerphone this morning and informed them both of what he's doing. Kane intones, "That was a bad idea." Victoria says Lily was horrified and Maddie was heartbroken. Victoria Kane YNR Lily asked her to fill in Charlie, who told her he was actually thinking about giving Kane a second chance. But not now. She thought she'd let Kane know that his big accomplishment has cost him everything. Phyllis steps in and comes at Victoria, who informs her she's filed a report with the FCC and there will be an investigation into the both of them. Phyllis is sure this will come back on the Newmans due to Arabesque. Kane says he took his loss. The logical thing would have been for them to take theirs and leave well enough alone. Victoria Kane Phyllis YNR Victoria informs Kane that he's not intimidating. She rubs it in about his kids and Lily thinking he's pathetic. Kane argues that her father brought this on himself. He took the program and used it. Now he's paying for it. If she thinks she can use Lily and his kids to affect him, I don't care. Victoria declares that he's lost his soul. On her way out, Victoria reminds Phyllis that she never deserved Nick and had no business being a Newman. Phyllis mocks that she took over the empire without ever sitting for one Sunday dinner with them. How lucky am I? Nick's lost night. Sharon finds Nick agonizing on her couch and is surprised he's not in the guest room. He's not sure if he's been there all night. She gawps. "Are you okay?" She clucks about him being on the porch in the cold last night, and he flashes to finding the pills in his pocket. Nick Sharon YNR they agree that yesterday was a lot, but necessary. Sharon wants to take him back to the hospital. Nick agrees to go get checked out, but he needs to talk to his dad first. Sharon argues the point, but he won't budge. Cheers! At Society, Diane and Kyle are making calls to let people know that Jabot is back. The cheers to Victor's actions destroying his own empire. Kyle bets he's losing his mind right now. Diane wishes they could see his face as it happens. Diane YNR Kyle worries Newman might not fall, but Diane's convinced it will. They debate until Diane declares that karma finally found Victor and was sent by Kane Ashby of all people. Busted at the ranch, Victor sees Jack and Nikki hugging and intones, "What the hell is this? You get your hands off my wife." Nikki Jack YNR Nikki protests that Jack came as a friend, worried about Kane's attack on Newman. Victor thinks he came to gloat. Jack argues he came to offer Nikki support because she's set to lose her company. Victor says she's not losing a damn thing and orders Abbott out. Jack skedaddles, shooting, "Have the day you deserve, Victor," over his shoulder. Adam and Chelsea arrive and report they've put out the suggestion that Phyllis and Kane did something illegal in the media. Nick limps in wanting an update, so they fill him in on their latest moves. Nick tells them he's called Summer about her mother. Victoria arrives and says that Phyllis couldn't care less what her daughter thinks. The family tries to coax Nick to go to the hospital, but he won't hide while their company is under being stolen. After the Newmans learn that Victoria tattled to Lily and Kane's kids, Nick asks Victor about Matt. His dad says, "That's been taken care of." Nick suggests his dad handle Kane as he handled Matt. Victor says it's crossed his mind, but he has other things to deal with first. Victor YNR Billy and Sally get to thinking at a cafe. Billy sits alone going over his past conversations with Sally about wanting to start from scratch with Abbott Communications and her agreeing to join him. He then remembers his argument with Jack, who implored him to respect Sally. Billy YNR on Crimson Light's patio. Sally recalls Billy telling her Dumas can take down Victor and he'll be happy watching from a safe distance, and then to him admitting he's still angry. She sighs, "I love you, Billy. I just don't know how much more I can take." The final scenes Jack joins Diane and Kyle at Society. He went to see Nikki and it's all true. Newman Media and Chancellor won't be spared either. Kyle grins. Jack bristles, explaining that Chancellor is a source of great pride to Nikki. Diane concedes it's a shame she has to be a victim of her husband's actions. Kyle Weinar. Jack tells Diane and Kyle that Billy's been offered control of Chancellor and seemingly can't refuse. Kyle rolls his eyes and warns Victor will go ballistic. Billy will be back at the top of his hit list. Diane declares, this is a mistake on so many levels. She can't imagine how Sally will feel about it. On Crimson Light's patio, Sally calls Audra to say how worried she is about all this Newman stuff. I really feel like I have a lot to lose. On the Kane train, Phyllis wants a change of scenery to get the creative juices flowing. Billy shows up and she tells him they're not giving interviews and tries to talk Kane out of offering him a position. Billy tells Kane his answer is a resounding yes. Do we have a deal? Or are you going to let her call the shots? At the ranch, Nick asks his mother how she's doing. Nikki admits she isn't great. She feels she's letting Catherine down. Adam assures her Kane is to blame, and he won't get away with it. Victoria agrees. Their dad won't give up without a fight. In the corner, Victor places an urgent call to Jill. The air in the township of Marlowe's Bend hung thick, a palpable soup of humidity and unspoken tension. It wasn't just the oppressive Queensland heat, promising another afternoon of sun that bleached color from the landscape and resolve from the soul. It was the waiting. For weeks, the sky had been a relentless, cloudless dome of ceramic blue, cracking the earth into a parched jigsaw, withering the heart of the district, the vast, emerald seas of sugarcane. Now, on this still Wednesday, a different pressure built. It was the kind of quiet that comes before a verdict is read, a silence so complete it seems to amplify the frantic, internal calculations of those awaiting judgment. In the modest weatherboard office of the Marlowe's Bend Cane Growers Cooperative, that judgment was being delivered. Seated across a scarred timber desk from Cooperative Secretary Jim Callahan was Victoria Atwood. To the men of the district, men like Jim, Victoria was still an unknown quantity, a city acquisition who had inherited Fairhaven, one of the largest and oldest cane properties in the valley, 18 months prior. She was a disruption in the well-worn rhythms of their world, sharp where they were rounded, analytical where they operated on instinct and generational habit. Today, she was not just a disruption. She was an earthquake. The current system is unsustainable, Jim, Victoria said, her voice cool and precise, cutting through the office's drowsy stillness. She laid a folder on the desk between them. Financially, environmentally, ethically. It's a pyramid scheme built on depletion and debt. Jim, a bear of a man with forearms like knotted cane stalks, shifted uncomfortably. He was used to discussions about tonnage, rainfall, and the perennial gripe about the mill's pricing. He was not used to words like ethical or sustainable in this context. It's the way it's always been done, Victoria. The cane gets cut, it gets crushed. We get paid. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. That's farming. This isn't farming, Jim. It's mining, she countered, tapping the folder. My soil assays show a 40% depletion in key nutrients in the last decade on the standard rotation. The chemical runoff reports into the Bend Creek are a litany of violations waiting for a regulator with the spine to look. And the debt. She opened the folder, revealing a graph that made Jim's stomach clench. Collectively, the co-op members are leveraged to the hilt. One poor season, one dip in the global price, and the bank won't be calling for a chat, they'll be sending the receivers. This was Victoria hitting the cane where it hurt. Not with a blunt instrument, but with the scalpel of data, slicing through tradition to expose the raw, vulnerable nerve endings of economic reality. She wasn't attacking their work ethic. She was demonstrating their looming bankruptcy. Her proposal was radical, a 5-year collective transition to organic, regenerative practices. Diversifying plots with legume cover crops, implementing integrated pest management, reducing water reliance through soil health, and pooling resources to build a small, on-site refining operation for specialist organic sugars and syrups, cutting out the monolithic mill and capturing the premium value themselves. You're talking about fantasy land, Jim muttered, but his eyes were fixed on the debt. Projection graph. He knew the numbers whispered a terrifying truth. The old way was dying. It just hadn't finished collapsing yet. I'm talking about survival in a form that leaves something behind for the next generation. Victoria said, her gaze steady. But I can't do it alone. Fairhaven will transition regardless. But the co-op's strength is in unity. I need a commitment from the majority by the end of the month. If not, Fairhaven will have to go its own way, and the co-op's bulk pricing agreement with the mill will be critically undermined. The ultimatum hung in the air, more withering than the sun outside. She had framed the choice not as a betrayal of tradition, but as a binary between collective evolution or collective ruin. As Jim watched Victoria's sedan kick up a plume of red dust on the long driveway out, he felt the foundations of his world, built on generations of sweat and simple rhythms, tremble. The news would spread through Marlowe's Bend faster than a bushfire. Victoria Atwood hadn't just challenged their methods. She had forced every man and woman who drew life from the cane to stare into a mirror and question the very future of the reflection staring back. 20 kilometers away, on the western fringe of the Fairhaven property, the reality of the old way was manifest in the shuddering, diesel-fumed form of a Massey Ferguson tractor. At its helm was Billy Rankin. At 22, Billy was a product of Marlowe's Bend in its purest form. He had left school at 16, as his father and grandfather had before him, to work the cane. His world was defined by physical borders, the fence lines of Fairhaven, the dusty perimeter of the local football field, the smoky confines of the Marlowe's Bend pub. His aspirations were similarly bounded, a steady wage, maybe his own Udo one day, the respect of the men he worked beside. The work was brutal. He was trashing, driving the tractor that towed a towering, infernal machine designed to burn off the dry, leafy tops of the cane before harvest. The air around him was a blistering furnace. Flames roared beside the tractor, heat washing over him in visible waves. Acrid, black smoke, laden with ash and the sickly sweet scent of burning sugar, clogged his lungs and stung his eyes, which were red-rimmed and perpetually squinted. His hands, gripping the wheel, were blackened with soot and grease, the nails permanently cracked and stained. This was the life. The only life he knew. It was a life of noise, of grime, of a fatigue so deep it felt like a permanent state of being. It was also a life of unthinking routine. You showed up, you drove the machine, you endured the heat, you collected your pay. You didn't ask why. You certainly didn't ask, what if? But today, a crack had appeared in the monolith of his certainty. It had started that morning with a brief, jarring encounter. Victoria Atwood, in her clean jeans and shirt, had pulled up in her Uda as Billy was prepping the tractor. She hadn't just given an order. She'd looked at the machine, then at him, and asked, "How long can you breathe that in every day, Billy?" He'd shrugged, mumbling something about being fine. But she'd held his gaze. "It's not fine. For you or the soil. We'll be changing this. Soon." Then she'd driven off, leaving him with a strange, unsettling thought. She saw me. Not just a pair of hands on a wheel, but a person breathing smoke. Now, as he guided the roaring beast down another endless row, that thought wouldn't leave. It mingled with the gossip he'd heard at the Smoko shed about her mad plan for the co-op organic. Fancy sugars. Revolution. The words were alien, ridiculous. Yet the memory of her question, "How long can you breathe that in?" echoed with a resonance that the usual pub bravado about toughing it out did not. His back ached with a dull, familiar throb. A fresh burn on his forearm, courtesy of a flying ember, pulsed under the grime. He looked out at the apocalyptic landscape he was creating. Fields of fire, blackened stalks against a smoke-choked sky, the earth beneath baking into a harder, deader crust. For the first time, he saw it not as just the job, but as an act of violence. Violence against the land, against his own body. A dead end in every sense. The life-changing decision didn't arrive as a thunderclap of inspiration. It seeped in through the cracks of his exhaustion, a quiet, insistent counterpoint to the roar of the flames. It was the culmination of 1,000 small moments of resignation. The muttered complaints of his uncle about bank pressure, the wheeze in his father's chest he now connected to 40 years of dust and smoke, the hollow look in the eyes of the old-timers at the pub who had nothing but the cane and soon wouldn't even have that. He thought of Victoria's data. The graphs Jim Callahan was doubtless scowling at right now. Billy didn't understand spreadsheets, but he understood cause and effect. You burn, you poison, you deplete. Eventually, you have nothing left to burn. That was the trajectory. The same year in, year out, until it ended. And then he imagined an alternative. Not in detail, the practicalities of regenerative agriculture were as foreign to him as nuclear physics, but in feeling. A field not shrouded in smoke, but green with different kinds of plants, or that didn't taste of cancer. Soil that was soft and alive, not a compacted wasteland. Work that wasn't a war of attrition against nature and self. It was a hazy, poorly defined picture, but it was colored with words like health, future, and a startling one, dignity. As he finally killed the tractor's engine at the end of the day, the sudden silence was a physical relief. The sunset, visible through the clearing smoke, was a stunning wash of orange and purple. He sat there, utterly spent, watching the colors deepen. The decision crystallized not as a bold declaration, but as a simple, internal surrender to a truth he could no longer ignore. The old life, the only life he knew, was killing him. And it was killing the land that was supposed to sustain him. To continue was a choice too, a choice to accept that death. Victoria Atwood had offered, however improbably, a glimpse of a different path. It was a risk. He would be ridiculed. He might fail. He might be cast out from the only community he knew. But as he climbed down from the tractor, his body protesting every movement, he knew the cost of staying put was now greater than the fear of stepping into the unknown. He would not just be quitting a job. He would be defying the immutable script of Marlowe's Bend. He would walk into Victoria Atwood's office tomorrow and ask simply, "What does changing this look like? And can I help?" 2 days later, the tension in Marlowe's Bend had coalesced into a palpable storm front. The pub was the epicenter. Jim Callahan, having reluctantly convened a co-op meeting to discuss Victoria's proposal, now held court in a corner, surrounded by a knot of growers. Their voices were a low, angry rumble. "She wants to turn us into bloody hobby farmers," snapped old Ron Henderson, his face leathery as a dried creek bed. "Legumes. What's next? Oh, yoga shed for the cane." "It's the debt graft that's the killer," said a quieter younger man named David, who had a mortgage bigger than his father's entire farm had been worth. "She's not wrong, Jim. We're on the edge. And jumping into a pit of fair trade, organic nonsense is the answer?" Jim retorted, but his heart wasn't in it. He'd spent 2 sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, Victoria's numbers scrolling behind his eyes. The truth was a bitter pill. The debate raged, tradition versus desperation, certainty versus terrifying hope. Into this maelstrom, just after 7, walked Billy Rankin. He was clean, which alone made him stand out. The chatter dipped momentarily. Billy was a fixture of the old guard, a young man firmly on the expected path. His presence was unremarkable. His destination was not. He didn't join the knot of men around Jim. Instead, he walked to the bar, bought a beer, and then, with a deep breath that felt like the first of his new life, he turned and walked directly to a small, isolated table where Victoria Atwood sat alone, studying a notebook. The pub fell so silent you could hear the hum of the fridge. Every eye was on them. Billy, feeling the weight of 100 judgments, pulled out a chair and sat down. "Ms. Atwood." "Billy." "Victoria, please." He nodded, took a swig of his beer for courage. "I've been thinking. About what you said. About changing things." He kept his voice low, but in the silence, it carried. "I don't know the first thing about all that other stuff. But I know tractors. I know this land. And I know I can't do another season of that burning." He looked up, meeting her gaze directly, ignoring the burning stares from across the room. "If you're serious about doing it different, I want in. I want to learn." Victoria studied him for a moment, seeing not just the soot-stained laborer from days before, but the fierce, uncertain courage in his eyes. She offered a small, genuine smile. "It won't be easy, Billy. There will be a lot of mistakes." And she glanced meaningfully at the frozen audience behind him. "A lot of people telling you you're a fool." "I'm used to hard work," Billy said, a steadiness entering his voice. "And I reckon I already know what being a fool looks like. I've been doing it for years." At the co-op table, Jim Callahan watched the scene unfold. He saw the defiant sat of Billy's shoulders, the respectful attention Victoria gave him. He saw the future of Marlowe's Bend bifurcating right before him. The angry, fearful conservation of the old, embodied in the men around him, and the terrifying, precarious leap into the new, happening at that small table. Billy's decision wasn't just a career change. It was a crack in the dam. If Billy Rankin, Fairhaven's own, could break ranks, what was stopping others who were secretly terrified of the debt, sick of the grind, worried for their kids? Jim looked down at his own calloused hands, hands that had worked the cane for 45 years. He thought of his grandson, who showed no interest in a life of smoke and debt. He thought of Victoria's graph. Then he pushed his chair back with a scrape that echoed in the quiet room. The decision wasn't fully formed, not yet. But a course had been set. Victoria Atwood had hit the cane where it hurt, exposing its fragile economic core. And Billy Rankin, by choosing to walk across a crowded pub, had made a life-changing decision that changed more than just his own life. He had offered the dying heart of Marlowe's Bend not a guarantee, but something it had lost, a glimmer of possibility, purchased not with bravado, but with the quiet, world-altering currency of a single conscious choice.